Jill. Um, Thanks for coming again. We really appreciate everyone joining, and we're just, you know, trying to share what we know, what we can, and anything that is useful to you all moving forward as we conduct our weatherization services here. So, first, next slide here. Oh, I have to click this here. The agenda items, we're going to a few updates and reminders. I want to talk about Hancock and again, twin site volunteer recruitment. Spend a little time on WAP client prioritization. Then we'll get into our scorecard, the spending production updates, talk about our IJA update status, future meetings, and we'll wrap it up with some WDR program updates. So thanks again for fire drill at his office. Well, I think we'll have to move forward. Okay, so first on weatherization. Yeah. Few updates and reminders. DHCD has requested a 90-day extension, no cost extension from DOE for the current grant cycle. As we've discussed in the past, this 3-year grant cycle ends this year. It effectively has ended. And we're still waiting for a decision from DOE. We do know that some other states have requested 90-day extensions. They have received them. The feedback from Tommy, our project officer, is positive. He feels like we've got a good case, but we just have to wait until we get it, and that has some impacts on we'll see in the spending production updates. Second reminder is a final draft we issued of the operations manual. It was a long process, a lot going on with DHCD and weatherization, and this is the end of this grant cycle. So that process took longer than we wanted it to, but in the end, I feel like we've got a good manual update. Thanks to everyone who responded, who reviewed it. Updates to the manual, we plan to release them for July 1st, and it will have an appendix addressing all questions and comments received, just like the WDR manual and that process for those who are familiar with that. Future annual update cycles will occur in the November to December timeframe, beginning this year. So I know we just finished it, but we're always identifying areas where that could use some more clarification. We timed it that way because that's about the same time we typically get red lines from DOE on the new annual update or a new annual plan. And the process flow we want to have is collecting throughout the year different operations manual updates, kind of logging them, putting in the parking lot, discussing them as a network, bring them into the operations manual in November along with the red lines, and then producing that updated operations manual, which then feeds into the annual plan. That's the process that we're looking forward to doing into the future. So, and third reminder is just an update, just something we're seeing in the field on issues related to lead safe practices. Probably have heard lead safe practices. I'm echoing still. Yeah, thank you for muting. Someone was echoing at it. Anyway, I know Jennifer McCoy has been discussing this, and I think you're going to hear more from our field monitors about lead safe practices and some systemic issues we're seeing. Right now, I know several folks are either out, our technical monitors, but we do have Jen Mayers. And Jen, I was wondering if you could go through some of these lead safe practices, what we're seeing in the field and so forth.
Thank you, Tim. Yes, I am holding the fort for the technical monitors. What we're seeing in the field, pretty much the picture on the door, it has peeling paint. The project indicated that it was built before 1978. But there was no testing done. And what we like to see is the testing done with the proper PPE. So like Tim pointed out, it's been pretty systemic, and we want to bring it to the network attention to focus on it because it has resulted in findings. The next slide, please. Just inconsistencies in the client files. This was pulled from Hancock Watt document. It says the year built. You can see it says yes, yes, but then it said lead paint no. DHC was told that the auditor took the lead test, but there was no documentation in the file as a photo. But that we also see tests, we also see billing for lead safe work indicated in selected measures being billed to LIHEAP and DOE. So that's a concern because it's an inconsistency. The next slide, please, Tim. And the WAP field guide makes it clear what the setup containment 10 feet away should look like. This was submitted. This is what it should look like based on the WAP field guide. And it's great that the field guides are in the vehicles, but it's important to reference them, the contractor for the crews that are putting the jobs in. So as Tim indicated, this is something that the technical team and Jennifer McCoy, we've seen, and this is a concern. And like I said, now it's resulting in findings. So if you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Okay. So Hancock Mint migration. We anticipate a fully operational build on the acceptance site beginning July 1st. What we'd like to have is sub-grantees run some twin Hancock operations, both in the current Gen 3 software and in the Hancock Cloud operation. Gen 3 is still our software. That's where we run production and invoice and everything. But we encourage you to select some jobs in Hancock Cloud at that time, and we'd like to compare the two and see how everything works. So, we're not saying do it for every job. If you want to, great. But first of all, there's a training function for you all for the network, and secondly, it's also some good feedback on the operational integrity of the software. I know CHP, Project Homes, and APCA have agreed to run some twin operations for select homes. We're encouraging more volunteers. Reach out to us if that's something you're interested in. Maybe we need, we could follow that up with a smaller group to discuss it in the future. But yeah, we are encouraging some participation in this effort while we evaluate the software update. If you have seen the software in the past, if you've seen the earliest videos on how it works, this migration process has taken a new turn, and the next build will have a new user interface. It has the ribbon on the left, and it's going to look a little more familiar, like the current Gen 3 software. What this also means is, the current training videos, the videos we recorded a year ago, just to give some exposure to how it works, are going to be deleted. We're going to update those, and or Hancock will, and we're going to upload those to the training center. So I think this will be a little bit more functional. It'll be faster according to Hancock, and I think it'll be a lot more familiar to everyone when this is deployed in the acceptance site. So. WAP ranking. The weatherization regulation for prioritization is located in 10 CFR 440. It's actually in the enabling legislation for weatherization too. Time on the waiting list is not a factor. What is a factor, though, are the elderly, disabled, families with children, and high energy users or high energy burden. So, when DOE monitored us last year, they issued a concern to us on client prioritization. How this impacts all of you is we need to ensure that we're enforcing, ranking priorities and they're being followed. So we're asking. I know Jennifer's been asking about this. We're already more closely monitoring, evaluating how subgrantees are prioritizing clients. What we're asking is before September 30th or for the annual formula grant, whichever is sooner, that DHCD will require all subgrantees to adopt some standard operating procedure for WAP priority ranking applicable to all funding sources. Okay. Will request you upload the standard operating procedure into the grant management plan for the annual formula grant to document your approach, how you intend to fulfill it in a way that follows the regulation, and we can monitor it. It has to be in some ways that's documented and we can monitor it. There are some possible solutions. Use Hancock. I mean, Hancock has a tool to do this. Some larger subgrant, and not necessarily larger subgrantees, but you can propose subregions to manage this, at different levels. And batch management approaches is another way to align your wait list with the production targets. If you have a 2-year wait list and that's your batch and you just work through that, that's effectively the same thing as not prioritizing, right? But if you have a 1-year target or a 3-month target, and maybe you freeze whatever your wait list is there and work through your 3-month target, and then the next 3 months, the next 3-month wait list you have, you can work through the priorities that way. That's okay, but again, batch management has a temporal element to it. So I see Leroy, you have a question?
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
This WAP ranking in Hancock, it gives you these ranking numbers, but the system and everything I have found doesn't tell you what those numbers represent. For instance, a number could be 77. It doesn't tell me what that 77 represents. And it definitely doesn't tell me whether it's a household with a high energy burden or a high residential user or nothing of that nature. So how do we supposed to use this ranking that's in Hancock?
So current Gen 3, I think, still takes into account time on the waiting list, which is not compliant. But that ranking that's produced is evaluated based on the data you provide into it, based on, energy burden, the age of the residents, the number of kids in the household, and so forth. And that does that in the background. So, what the magic is that comes up with number 77. I think you have to take an element of faith that's calculating it properly in the background. Jennifer McCoy, do you have any comments on that?
Nope, not at this time. Basically, you kind of covered what I've been doing for the on-site visits at this point, is having discussions with the subgrantees in terms of how they themselves are utilizing the WAP ranking to get an idea. And I think that has kind of lended to the possible solutions. Going forward, I do expect that us as a team are going to work together to get even more clarification as far as best practices.
Stephen?
Yes, so Leroy, so the highest number is the ones you work on first, if you didn't know that, which you probably did. But so about the policy, even though, I mean, we've used the ranking number ever since it come out, we set our clients up by ranking numbers. But you still want a policy saying that we're using WAP ranking numbers. Am I understanding that correct? And you said all funding sources. Are we just talking about weatherization funding sources, or, EHARP and ARP, all that as well, or?
Just weatherization. And what I mean by that is IJA, annual formula, LIHEAP. So.
Yeah, and some things that we run into now when, of course, we're a smaller agency and we don't have months set up of, audits scheduled out and stuff like that. But when we can't get a hold of people, we go down the numbers, go to lower. I mean, we just follow the list. We've got the highest rankings up front, and we just go down till we get somebody. You know what I'm saying? I mean, not that we're trying to put somebody ahead of, but we got to get clients, you know, and there's other issues, you know, where, you know, 8 of them needs WDR, you know, but you ain't got no jobs to work on, you know, because you're waiting on WDR stuff to get done. So you have to go back through the list and find jobs that you can weatherize to get jobs completed as well. Just some thoughts there.
Okay, but thank you. That's good feedback, and thanks for. I didn't quite understand Leroy's question. I see Brian was commenting too. Bill.
So I think the way, of course, this has always been a challenge trying to meet the DOE priorities, and it looks like DHCD's intent is to offer some flexibility, at least as long as it doesn't get DHCD in trouble with DOE. So, I mean, things like subregions and batch management and that sort of thing. So that being said, I guess one question I would have, or something to consider, is perhaps to give equal priority to, beyond what DOE requires, things like how long someone's been on a waiting list, and perhaps somebody that received crisis no heat assistance, the fact that they had no heat and you needed to address that immediately, and now you have some investment in it, and oftentimes that requires, because the resources in crisis are not sufficient, for example, to address a system, you have to put weatherization funds in, and now you've got an investment in it that you need to try to recoup as soon as you can. So hopefully DHCD can and will be open to those sort of considerations and flexibility as well.
We understand that some organizations may be managing a wait list outside of Hancock. And that can be okay if it's documented. What we're saying has to be documented in your standard operating procedure and how you are going about it. Yeah, I understand there's some repairs and so forth, but I think if you're looking at it first come, first served, I think that'll be pretty clear in the monitoring. If that's the only thing you're doing, and time on the waiting list, though, Bill, I would say is what was cited as, you know, first come, first served is essentially time on the waiting list, and I think that's what DOE was saying. But yes, we are asking for some, we've spoken to the network about this. We've heard some interesting ideas, such as subgrantees, such as subregions or batch management approaches, and we want. We definitely don't want to prescribe the solution here, but we just want to outline, you know, what we need to do to comply and what we're going to be looking for. And I think if the standard operating procedure reflects the regulation and we can monitor it, I think that should be fine. Megan?
Good morning. Yeah, so a couple of things. I think you notated that the current software version of Hancock does take into account length of time on the wait list. So in order to get a more accurate wait list, can that be deactivated in Hancock? Because I think one of the big issues I know for us is that number fluctuates, obviously, based on how long you're on the wait list. So what we think might be the next client to serve actually probably shouldn't be the next client to be served because of the time that they've been waiting for services. So that was one question. The second question was, I know back when we first started using Hancock, they provided to DHCD basically a matrix of this is what how this number is calculated. And because time on wait list now will be removed from that calculation, when we put a client into Hancock, the WAP number should be the WAP number, and that should never change, is my guesstimation based on the intake information that we are putting in. So is there a way that we can get from Hancock how that's weighted, or is it weighted? Because I know previously was weighted, again, because of base length of time. But, you know, for every child, you got a point, or, and a child under 6, there was additional points. So I think that would be really helpful so that we could all understand. I think another thing is, I know there have been questions, whether it be in the WAG group, is understanding when you don't have a number present, what does that mean? Because if you don't have all the required documents in there, you will get a 0. And so for folks that maybe are new to Hancock, or, you know, just, I think more information would be helpful for the network. I could be kind of speaking out of turn, but I think it would be helpful.
Let me follow up with, that's a good suggestion on the computation that goes on in the background. We considered removing that, you know, and of course, you know, the cloud migration has been like Lucy in the football here. So we've always thought, well, let's just follow through with Gen 3 as it is, because I think it would be disruptive if we suddenly, you know, disruptive to all operation planning if we suddenly pulled that out of their computation. So we thought, well, let's just let it carry through for Gen 3. We'll implement it with the cloud software. That's kind of how we're thinking about it. But let me follow up with Hancock to see if we can, you know, be transparent about what the current calculation is, and maybe it'll help everybody with their developing their operating plans. So thank you, Megan. Ken, morning.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Tim. So one, I guess I would like to throw out, and I don't know, we haven't tried it yet, but we're excited to participate in the pilot program. And just, you know, so my question kind of to those who've already participated some, are they seeing a difference in the WAP numbers from the Gen 3 to the new Mint version? And I'll let that be answered later. My other question is with the WAP ranking, is how, is there any thought or consideration being put into when we have utility funding for jobs? Because the utility obviously is expecting some kind of response, you know, timely response on their referrals with their clients and customers. So, and the other advantage with utility funding is that often can produce a lower cost WAP job, which, you know, for a small agency like that, having, you know, a small job here and there, or even monthly, can be very beneficial to keeping the ACPU down. So that's where kind of getting away from the WAP ranking could be useful. So I'm just going to leave it at that and let you all respond from there. Thank you.
That's a great point, Stephen. Unfortunately, you know, the regulation there is really codifying exactly what's in the legislation. But you know, I'm kind of asking the network, and as you develop your plans, if you have a way to meet that regulation, and meet other objectives, because yeah, we certainly wouldn't want to see any possible leveraging opportunity lost. You know, so if you know, maybe that's a case where you can kind of batch management the jobs. Again, if your batch management is 2 years over it because you have a 2-year wait list, that's effectively the same thing as kind of a first come first serve. But I think maybe you do a batch management freeze once a month or every 3 months or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, you at least raise an issue of how complicated this can be, Ken. And I just can't give you any more guidance other than, you know, we need to comply with what DOE requires and what the enabling legislation requires. So, Stephen?
Yeah. So in what we have now, there's a time sensitive box that you can check and get like 25 points. And, when you're dealing with utility funds, me personally, I've used this because you only have a certain amount of time to spend these funds. If you don't, then somebody else is going to get them and spend them. So, I feel like that could be, if it's going to be in the new system, a workaround to help keep the ACPU lower and be able to serve those customers.
Okay.
Just
That's a good point. Let me follow up with Hancock on that to see if they're carrying that function over. Thank you, Stephen. These are all great questions. I don't know if others have, maybe you can bring it up later. I'd like to move on to the rest of the presentation at this point, but thanks for everyone's input. It's good stuff. Next, we're getting into our scorecard, just to talk about where we're at for the year. And again, as we'll see, we have not spent out the entire grant. We have asked for a no-cost extension, which would be great. I feel like we're well positioned to spend out the entire grant if we get it. But so these ACPU levels reflect, as of now, what we've spent through our period of performance, which ends June 30th. Until we get if we get a no-cost extension, again, I'm optimistic there, and I think we've got a pretty good case for it. So ACPU levels, you can see there, we're in good shape. I personally like to see them up close to the ACPU because that means we're really optimizing what we're doing. So you look at DOE 24 at 7879 is a network, and our limit there is 8,497. So we're up, right around 90%. That's great. And I do see, our LIHEAP is down, which is great. It's still, I think, fairly elevated. And I think we're going to have some closer monitoring of LIHEAP. We anticipate the next award in August, or I'm sorry, July from DSS. And I think, we know we're good for LIHEAP into 2026, but after that, we just don't know. And it's hard to imagine us going from 17,000 in LIHEAP to 0 in the course of a year. I think we're going to have to be mindful of bringing that LIHEAP ACPU down to an area where we're making progress to optimize our operations toward a future which could be at a low level. So IJA is actually elevated. We were heading down. Now we went up. This is something we're really going to have to address in the near future because it's just entirely too high. We've been cited by as one of several states on the naughty list by the General Accounting Office for our elevated ACPU. Again, that's an average over the entire grant cycle, but we're about halfway through that, so we've got the other half to get well under it. So now looking at our health and safety percentage levels, again, I like to see them right at that limit around 15%. It means we're optimizing, we're leveraging all those funds. And I'd like to make the case for higher health and safety levels. But in order to do that, we need to be more consistently at 15%. Probably our next opportunity to do that will be with the IJA funding renewal next August, or April. But as you can see that we're only about 7.5% there. So we do have some data to show that we're trending toward that 15% and pushing that. But again, leveraging health and safety is really important, that we leverage all funding and optimize on all funding. And I highlighted there below. Remember, health and safety calculation is outside the ACPU. So when you maximize that, typically, you use less in project operations. So moving on to the scorecards here, 2022 is spent out. So a round of applause for everyone here. That's great. Great to see. Our weatherization readiness funds for 2022, really close. And in fact, with the no cost extension, that will be zeroed out. So that's job well done. 23 also completely spent out as of June. And that's which is really great to see. 2023 readiness funds, a little more mixed picture, but I do believe the demand for the remaining funds here, and it's not just the remaining balance, 57,000 there, does not reflect the total amount because there's about 66,000 which hasn't been obligated. So there's more like about 100, how's my math, 133 here available. But I do believe there's demand for that, and with the 90-day extension, I'm optimistic that again we can zero that out. 2024, again, our ACPU is coming in at about 78, 79, so we're at about 90% of the ACPU, but we do have a fair amount that just is unspent, and we either have to return it unless we get it, or we get a no cost extension. And I think we've got a pretty good case for a no cost extension, and I'll keep everyone updated on that. So, and finally, the remaining readiness funds, quite a bit remaining. I believe there's some additional demand for these. With 3 months, I'm optimistic that we can actually zero this out. I mean, based on historical spending levels for repairs across the network, I do believe this is realistic. So it's going to take some work by everyone, but I think we've got an opportunity here to do this too with a 90-day extension. Again, these weatherization readiness funds can be leveraged on either a DOE 24 house or complete or an IJA complete through the 90-day period when we get it, assuming we get it. So moving to LIHEAP, that is pretty much tracking for the end of the year, going toward September, October. Not much to say there other than, the ACPU is trending down, which is good news. It's still a little higher than I'd like to see it. Again, we don't have a firm limit on that, but I'm told in the past, DSS has questioned us when it gets to this level. So, it's an exemption we've indicated in our LIHEAP plan. But even still, I think it's probably higher than DSS would like to see it, and they can't ask us about it. They haven't yet. Finally, on IJA or bill funding, right now we've moved to about 3/4 of a way through the funding that we have allocated on the first 32 million. So pretty good jump of 5-6% since the last monthly update. And we submitted our annual plan to DOE for the next grant cycle. Last year it was awarded. Jen, when was it awarded? Like in late July or early August?
It was in the beginning of August.
Yeah, so that was early from my understanding historically, right?
Mhm.
So, the primary, if you have DOE 24 funds to spend and we get the extension, that's going to be a resource for you. Otherwise, IJA funding is going to be your primary resource for everyone for weatherization throughout the summer. So we can take advantage of this time and really make some headway to getting to that our goal. And actually, I think that's wrong. Yeah. This is not 72.8, 75.8 on the attic fill tracker here. We're getting closer, about 3/4 of the way up. The goal here is to get to 30% of our grant production for the first half. So we need 1,442 units, and we're about 1,050. So making good progress on that. We have met our minimum production targets for DOE to meet DOE's monitoring goals. And just a reminder, we not only need to meet 30% of all units as as a milestone to capture that second half of funding for the state. But also all our monitoring cycle has to be up to date. And so we now, are feeling increasingly confident we'll be able to do that since everyone has actually, met the production targets for DOE. And, we also need to make sure that sub-grantees are doing their part in QCIing and doing quality control efforts as well. So,
Tim, we have a couple questions in the
yep,
chat.
let's turn there.
Oh,
Okay.
no, I thought maybe we'd take Catherine Maloney's question first, even though she came in last. Sorry, Mark. She said, when are we expecting DOE funding? Want me to answer?
The updated, again, I just, what Jen and I just were talking about, his last year it was early August. Historically, it's been in September, I guess, right?
It's been as late as October. It's been as early as July. But the typical has been around August. The issue is that our state plan has still not been approved. And it has not gone to as far as I know, gone to the grant officers for their review yet. DOE had a reduction in staff. I think they have 8 or 9 people now working in that office. They used to have like 32. And so there is a lot of backup. There are still folks, Mark pointed out, who are April 1 states, meaning they should have received their contracts and funding on April 1st, who are still without. A few have gotten it, but a few are still waiting. So they're 3 months now without any DOE funding. And just so you know, weatherization is not currently in the budget bill. And so we're not sure if it will even be funded. So the short answer is that we have no idea when we might get funded. Our project officer, Toomey, is working very hard and is doing the best he can to try to get us answers. But until the budget is funded, nobody's going to be getting any funding. But IJA is funded. And so you do have access to those funds. And LIHEAP is funded for at least another year for us in Virginia. And so you will have access to those funds as well. So you may be needing to rely on those funds until we get the new funding. And we have already started the contracts preparation so that the moment we do get, when we do get DOE funding, we'll be able to issue contracts and make those funds available for you in Hancock, and it will be backdated till July 1st. Just wanted to give you that as much as I can tell you.
In terms of LIHEAP funds, I'm going to have to talk to Michelle and Jen on what that cycle will be in terms of any recapture or so forth to Mark's question. So, July is a good time to start thinking about it. But I don't want to speak for Michelle on this. She's got a great system. And as far as, yes, there are still some IJA funds that were recaptured. Some of them were reallocated. Some of them were not reobligated because we wanted to ensure that at the time we weren't aware that we would have LIHEAP funding for the next year, and we weren't aware that we really didn't know if we'd have DOE funding. So I think we need to make sure that everyone has funding. And I think we did a good job in reallocating IJA funds for the next year to ensure that there's enough to cover what seems to be typical production rates, somewhat at the expense of being able to, make our production go very fast in IJA to get the next amount of funding. But I think we're going to just wait. I'd like to see us really get that LIHEAP award before we make a final decision to reallocate any IJA, the remaining IJA funding. And we're just going to have to see what happens. But in terms of bridge funding, the existing IJA funding, and very likely the LIHEAP funding, I think will be what carries us through while we're waiting for the DOE. And plus, as I just showed, we still have some work to do on DOE 24 once we, if and when we get our no cost extension. So, Mark has a follow-up here. Follow up on, will it be retroactive to July? And yes, the DOE annual funds will be retroactive to July. If the IGA production is met by fall this year, will DHCD apply sooner for the second? Absolutely, as soon as we can. But again, it depends on monitoring. Monitoring is going to be wrapping up in September. We're on track to do that because everybody met their production targets. So last year we couldn't do that because not everyone hit their production targets. So, any other question on these issues? It's a lot. I know a lot going on, and we're trying to make sure everybody's able to deliver on for their clients and work through just some complicated times here. All right. The next network meeting is July 23rd at 9 a.m. Michelle will send out her invitation. August update will take place during the interchange on August 19th, and we hope to see everyone there. So, and now turn it over to Aaron for the WDR updates.
All right. Good morning. My name is Aaron. Hang on the script. Where is it? Oh, Shoemaker. And I'm the Housing Program Administrator at DHCD for the Weatherization Deferral Repair Program, or we call it WDR for short. Over the course of the next several slides, I will take you on a journey through updates for WDR and some reminders, and briefly discuss data on WDR expenditures, remittances, and also give you a preview of upcoming manual update information. Next slide, please. So the first reminder is that the 22, 23, and 2024 grant agreements expired June 30th, 2025, which is this year and this month and 5 days from now. So we're currently processing the final remittances in CAMS for these budgets and continuing to work with a couple of subgrantees on, getting some corrections and items done with those final remittances to make that June 30 deadline. And the remaining funds that, this is something I've contacted each subgrantee individually about that had remaining funds, but just to reiterate, the remaining funds will be allocated to subgrantees who need additional WDR to serve their territory based on request, need, and performance. And the funds will be moved to the 24 to 26 or 25 to 26 is what we call it, CAMS, the 2-year grant agreement. So what this means is do not submit any new initial setup reports, any new jobs under 22, 23, or 24. And all new jobs for the initial setup reports and remittances for previous jobs will be submitted, any remittances at this point, unless we're working with you on those old ones. Those should go under the 2-year grant agreement. And just as a heads up, you may still see money in the budget and CAMS for those old agreements for a couple of weeks. This is just because we have to work through our internal process for moving the funds from the old budgets to bless you, from the old budgets to the new ones, which requires grant amendments and the like. So even if you still see that money, don't spend it. It just means we're doing our internal process. Second reminder is that the 6-month update, which is going to be soon to be the old update. So that was sent out February 20th, 2025. I think this is just going to be an ongoing reminder in these presentations, and that is to make sure that you're using the most recent version of the manual and the most recent version of the forms. And you can always check the website for the most recent versions. We don't surprise anybody. We always send them out to the network via email and then upload them to the website subsequently when they go into implementation. So just emphasizing this because we still are getting some reports and remittances that sometimes have the old versions of the forms. So next slide, please. Oh, and just those last two bullet points are just what I'm going to be covering now, which is a preview of the August 2025 WDO program manual. But before we get to that preview, let me give you a preview of the timeline. So this is the target timeline for the comment period and final release of the August 2025 WDO program manual. We're aiming to email out the WDO program manual final draft for comment period early July. As usual, the comment period will be 30 days. And we've had a tendency to get the majority of the feedback during the last couple days of the 30-day period, and totally understandable. So we're not committing to an exact date for the actual release. We don't know the volume of feedback that we're going to get, but we do take it very seriously. And your feedback on previous versions of the program manual really has helped us with everything from catching typos to improving syntax and sentence structure to helping us clarify core features of the funding manual. So we want to make sure we have ample time to put the feedback that we get that's relevant into the Q&A section of the manual and the appendix, and have time to clarify that as well. And so our target is to get the manual out in the first half August, prior to the weatherization interchange, which is the week of the 18th. So there you go. That's the general timeline. Please slide to the next. All right. So with the manual around the corner, over the next few slides, I'll discuss the key changes. I do want to emphasize, just in case this wasn't already clear, we haven't sent out the draft yet. This is just a preview, and it's subject to change. So the comment period hasn't begun. You're welcome to ask questions and comments during this presentation, although it looks like we're about 11 minutes out, but we'll do our best to answer anything ahead of time. And yeah, so the biggest change is that we're overhauling the cost limits significantly. And we formerly call these cost caps, but they're now the cost limits. And this is based on discussion with the network, also data from average job cost, and discussions with our internal finance staff on how this would be a much better process. So there will be a $30,000 total job cost limit and a $15,000 repair type cost limit. So what this means is that chart and the appendix that has region-specific cost limits, it's going to be gone. It's going to be way simpler. No more individualized repair type cost limits. You don't need to look up the municipality to see how much, what the cost limit is on electricity in Montgomery County. So just to reiterate, $30,000 cost limit for all jobs and $15,000 for all repair types. We're also considering implementing a $5,000 cost limit on change orders. So hypothetically, this could mean that an approved job for $30,000 could have a $5,000 change order, and the remittance on the housing repairs could end up being $35,000. Same thing with the repair types. $15,000 is the most we'll approve. There's extra plywood for a roof, for example, up to $5,000 for that change order on the remittance. Now, we're still going to have an allowance for exceeding the cost limits. It's just we're going to be prescriptive about what the required documentation is. It's going to require demonstration that DHCD funded sources that can also cover deferrals, and these repair types have been exhausted. So for most of you, this is going to mean the Weatherization Readiness Fund, WRF, and EHARP, the Essential HARP. And we're also going to require that you have 3 requests for bids. I want to emphasize that says requests, not the actual bids themselves, because we want to be sensitive to the fact that in many areas in the state that it is difficult to actually get bids from contractors for certain repair types just because of the pool of businesses in that area. And this isn't on the slide, but we are considering sending out an information notice, or we used to call them program updates, July 1 on the cost limits to implement them as soon as possible. This is something that would benefit the network greatly. We think $15,000 is a significant increase in repair type cost limit for most repairs, and it would make things a lot easier for processing remittances. So stay tuned. We'll let you know, of course, via email if we're implementing the program update prior to the release of the manual. Next slide, please. So that was single family jobs. For multifamily jobs, and I'm not going to go too much into this just because this doesn't impact the majority of people on the call, but we'll be proposing that these jobs will require submission of a signed funding plan, something that's more of a commitment than the preliminary funding plan that is already required for the initial setup report. We're still developing the language for this, but stay tuned for the final draft for more clarity on how we're going to address multifamily cost limits for WDR. Slide next, please. Another change is that we're modifying the language to state that WDR repairs are explicitly listed in the manual, or said differently, we're going to be removing the language that enables DHCD to approve repairs that are not listed explicitly, meaning you will have a more prescriptive guideline on what is and is not allowed. We already basically de facto do this, but we still get some questions about repairs that are not listed in the manual. And so the network, as well as our internal finance staff, have called for us to be more prescriptive about this. And so this is a way of addressing that. We're maintaining those 6 main categories listed on the slide for repair types. We're maintaining the other category, which has explicitly listed costs that don't necessarily fit into the other categories, that like your downspouts and your roof soffit, and maintaining the items listed in the crossover projects. So with this update, we're not scaling back what is already in the manual. Speaking of those crossover projects, we also are clarifying that they can no longer be done explicitly for ACPU relief. It was never stated in the manual that crossover projects were intended for ACPU relief alone. But it's something that has been a point of confusion. So this is something that we're clarifying, in the language that we are proposing for this draft are that eligible repairs for crossover projects include any energy conservation / savings measure with an SIR less than 1, and the health and safety measures after DOE and IJA health and safety funds have been exhausted. So that's also aligning with the justification for change orders, that we're really emphasizing braiding funding with WDR where possible. All right, and the upcoming slides, I'm going to go over the remaining balances, but I don't know if we have any questions yet, but we'll get the questions at the end.
Megan's got her hand up.
Yep.
I just want to understand. So the statement about WDR is not specifically for ACPU relief. So in the state plan and in the operations manual, a dwelling is eligible for deferral if the agency is going to go above the ACPU. It's in the state plan operations manual, even the drafted. So totally understand, but I also it is in there that a home could be deferred because it goes above the ACPU. But WDR you can't just say for ACPU reasons.
That's correct. Tim, can I punt this one over to you to comment on?
Yeah, I mean, I think again the ACPU is an average. You can defer it. I mean, that's one way to make the average is to defer everything there. But but you certainly I see the value maybe in the future of having it explicitly for ACPU relief, but I think for now, I feel like there's a lot of opportunities for ACPU relief that really, we believe should be optimized and first in order to clearly have what to clearly prescribe what WDR is for. We've never actually advocated and never said this was an allowable use. But what you're saying is it is a deferral fund and ACPU is a reason for deferral. Therefore, it's inconsistent with the language, the explicit language we have on ACPU, and it's related deferral. Okay, let me take a look at that.
And let me clarify that, yes, we do defer homes that are over, but the homes that we're going into, there's an exceptional amount of other funding being put into it. So it's it's a $24,000 weatherization job. And we're still trying to proceed with it because we'd really like to not have to add more to that $24,000 weatherization job because again, right now we have multiple funding sources. I just wanted to, like, I understand, I know the emphasis and thought behind using WDR, and I think for the most part, most agencies are, trying to utilize it for what it should be used for, to address true deferral issues, roofs, things like that. But there are those occasions when we feel like the weatherization cost is excessive. It's actually over the ACPU, but this home needs whatever this is, and by taking it off of weatherization, it would allow this client to stay in the home longer. The home will become more efficient. The home will become stable for that household. Again, I guess my biggest thing is I wouldn't want to see it completely, if an agency can make a case for it because it is in the operations manual and the state.
Yeah. The parts of our manual which allow for our discretion on this, and we've not liked to put limits on this and so forth in the past. We just receive a lot of feedback from finance that the more prescriptive we can make this, the better. And our discretion is I mean, it's not something consistent that can be evaluated. So, but I can understand what you're saying. The challenge right now is trying to make it so that it is prescriptive. What is eligible for ACPU relief? So, but I take the question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thank you, Megan. We're glad to be getting those types of questions like sooner than later because that will help us shape the language in the manual for this. We're a little past 10, so I'm going to speed through the next couple of slides.
Aaron, Aubrey has his hand up.
Aubrey?
You're on mute. Aubrey, you're on mute if you're. Okay, there you are.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I
We can
can.
hear you now.
Okay, before we run out of time, I got a question. It pertains to doing the energy audit before you submit the paperwork for the WDR. On some houses, it's basically impossible to do an energy audit until the WDR measures have been done. Like if you got holes in the ceiling, you got missing ceiling, you got holes in the floor, you got asbestos, mold, or other bacterial growth, you cannot do a blower door until the WDR measures have been completed. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously it has to be re-audited after you make the repairs then. But I think, you know, for something that we think is in that kind of shape, we've encouraged just walkthroughs, hands in pockets, assessing whether or not you can actually audit or, you know, when the audit takes place. Sometimes this can be done simultaneously with the audit. Sometimes it needs a bit of a walkthrough. Of course, the walkthrough is important to look at it and say, you know what, this is just beyond what we can do with WDR. So,
Right, and the concern that we've been having is we're okay. So yeah, having a giant hole in the roof or the wall is going to impact the blower door testing, as will like aerated hazardous material. But we're seeing remittances come in on jobs that don't have either of these measures being addressed, that don't have an energy audit, and it's just concerning from our standpoint, the timeline on the job. So if the energy audit hasn't been completed, that was submitted, 6 months ago for pre-approval, it's something that we want to reach out about. What is the timeline for the energy audit being completed on this, and also the weatherization? So thank you for that question.
Yeah, well, normally once the WDR measures have been completed within, say, 2 weeks or probably less, the auditor goes back to the house and does the actual energy audit. And, in some measures, they have to be done before you do the energy audit, regardless of, everything else. You do the WDR measures, then you do the energy audit.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah,
Yep,
I mean,
right.
again, repair measures. Yeah. Bill, quickly, we are running late here.
Yeah, just quickly, Aubrey, I may be wrong in what I think you're asking, but what we're seeing on the screen about a new requirement that eligible repairs need to meet an SAR less than 1, I think I was interpreting Aubrey's question as, can't do that if we can't do an audit.
Maybe it's measures rather than repairs. It's really sort of you find out the audit on the back end, and we can supplement, with WDR some of the fraction of the cost that cannot be covered by weatherization if the SIR is below 1, is really what we're saying. So in other words, we'd essentially be using WDR for an energy conservation measure, an energy savings measure, to cover the delta. Okay.
All right.
Go ahead to the next slide, Aaron.
Yeah, let's go ahead. And I mean, there isn't a whole lot left, but yeah, we can just go to the next slide. The next 2 slides are the updates to the charts.
Yep. Sorry, that's me.
Scorecards, as we call them. So there are no spreadsheets for the 22, 23, and 24 because those are being closed out. But they haven't been closed out yet. So for 24, 26, these are the remaining balances for the subgrantee network. And it's 81.2% of the funds, which is 18.9 million, are remaining. So that's $15.3 million remaining. And that number will increase once we roll over the funds from the previous grant agreements. Next slide, please. And these are, I'm not going to go in depth on these. You can take a look at them when we send the slides out, but these are the figures that are based on remittances that are submitted for WDR, for homes served and average cost, as well as the different repair types. And, you know, these numbers have been staying pretty consistent month to month. So with that, that concludes the WDR program update. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the questions. Those good questions. And, you know, again, we're going to be in touch with any subgrantees regarding the closeout of 22, 23, and 24 to resolve any remittances and jobs that we need to take care of before those funds are moved over. So with that, thank you to the entire network for showing up. You know, thanks to those who stayed back, who had questions, and have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone. If you have any
Thanks,
follow-up
everybody.
questions, please send it to us. You can use the WAP at dhcd.virginia.gov, and you know, we'll try and get back to you and share whatever we can with the network, or to any one of us. That's fine too. So, thanks, everyone. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Everybody, have a wonderful Wednesday.